Here at KNKT, it's about 2 minutes after 1 o'clock, and ABQ connecting with our good friend on the coast. It's Holland Davis from Ocean Hills. How you doing, Holland?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Peter?
Just blessed, and appreciate you coming around this afternoon, filling us in on, just worshiping. Wherever you are, whatever's going on today, we need to be in that worship spirit, don't we?
Yes. It's such a privilege to be with you today.
Yeah, listen, you were the worship leader there at Ocean Hills, and to spend some time, of course, Pastor Skip was out there for several years, and you worked with Skip, and I know that you've come through here a time or two as well, right?
I've been there, yeah. It's actually, in fact, we're actually talking about coming out there again, possibly for a Lively Hearts reunion.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Would you sit in? Would you be like the fifth Lively Heart or something? Or
I would be like the very large George Harrison.
Well, I tell you, we had a very very nice time, but the Beatles Experience was here. Have you ever been to that production?
I have not, but I've heard it's just awesome.
Pretty unbelievable from an audio and a production standpoint, just great. But that's not why we came to talk. We want to worship the King of Kings and Lord of Lords here. And Holland, you've got a brand new book that puts us in that place very nicely. It's called Let It Rise. And why don't you talk a little bit about, first of all, your heart for worship, how the Lord developed that, and then what you're kind of spinning off of that into this book.
Well, what the book is, what Let It Rise is, it's a collection of the workshops that I've done at various worship conferences around the nation over the last, I would say, 20 years. So it's really the culmination of 20 years of ministry, of really looking at the function of a worship leader and what worship is in the church, what it does. And so we cover everything from, developing a theology of worship to, really what the role of the worship leader is, to, developing a vision for worship in your church, helping your congregation to worship, managing worship team relationships, and of course one of the most important relationships, the relationship between the pastor and the worship leader, but we also talk about things like, the prayer life of the worship leader and how to be spirit-led as a worship leader, how to almost, what I call see the invisible, seeing God at work within a congregation. And so we really do cover the gamut of the topic of worship, and it's done in kind of a fun way because I'm not a big book reader. I love to listen to books, but sometimes just the reading of the lines and the words and they're all the same, it just I'll fall asleep. So we made a book that was visually interesting and it's quirky and it's funny, so it kind of holds your attention all the way through. Yeah,
it has splashes of just kind of like songs are bursting out of there from time to time. That's great. Holland, you mentioned several of the areas there of worship and the corporate function and relationships, and of course you're going to get into the heart of worship here. Give us your definition, and I know you have several definitions of worship in the book, because I think we all kind of have a sense of what that means to us, but get to the core of it here.
Well, worship has there's so many facets to it, because it really isn't just a musical expression. It really is the expression of life that flows out of someone that's in love with Jesus. And so on a broad sense, any act of love that someone does in response to God loving them is an act of worship. So that could be as simple as, because you love Jesus and you see a need in your community, maybe your neighbor needs someone, a night out to work on their marriage, and so out of your love for God, you say, hey, I want to watch your kids. That could be an act of worship as much as singing a song in church is an act of worship. But one of the things we do focus on is the congregational setting of worship, and how I've kind of come to define worship in a congregational setting is that worship is really our prayer set to music. So it's really the worship service is really a prayer service. It's where we gather together and we corporately talk to God as a corporate entity. And so I spent a lot of time talking about what that entails in terms of the life of the worship leader, being able to know what the heartbeat of the congregation is, being able to know what the heartbeat of the pastor is, and being able to bring all of that as they're seeking the Lord to really select songs and create an environment that is going to facilitate the prayers that are already in people's hearts to the Lord.
Well, that's great. That's the facilitation of the whole process, right? And that's really more your role than just kind of a song list producer kind of thing, right?
Yeah, because I actually sometimes jokingly refer to the set list as like the prayer list, And so I prepare my team to be ready to pray songs that may not be on the prayer list, just to be ready and part of that is my preparation with the team to get them ready to know more than just a few songs, and for them, and I encourage them, that we're here to not pray from the chart or play from the charts, that we're really playing from the heart. And so, part of their homework is they got to have a catalog of songs that they can pull into, because when you're praying with other people, you hear one person pray, and that changes your prayer. How you're going to pray next. And so, oftentimes I've been in services. I was the worship leader for Pastor Chuck Smith at Costa Mesa for a number of years, and he would sometimes stand up, and just his opening prayer would change our entire set list. Because he would set the tone in prayer, and I'd realize that the tone that we were coming out with was not matching, and so we would just, at that moment, I'd turn to the group and say, okay, you're just following me now, and we would just, on the fly begin to put together songs that really captured the heart of what was going on at that moment with that congregation and with their interaction with God.
That's certainly the Spirit-led focus of worship. And again, thanks for kind of taking it to that level. I know that that can be uncomfortable for some, though, can't it?
Oh, it is extremely uncomfortable, and a lot of it has to do with your culture. If you have, as a musician, if you grow up, and I say this, to guys in the team, if you're classically trained, for instance, classically trained musicians, many of them are not trained to improv, so they're trained to follow the music. So you have a beginning, and you have an end, and you have all the notes in between. Jazz musicians are more trained to be, improv. They're trained, with their ear to be able to hear music, and so we do a blend of both somewhere there. We want to have musicality, but we also want the musicians to be able to listen to each other and begin to go in different directions, even if they don't have the sheet music in front of them.
Well, that's great. Yeah, there's a book a couple of months ago you came out that correlates faith like jazz as well, just because of that free-flowing spirit. That's where we really should be with the Lord, isn't it?
Yeah, because, all I know is that in my interaction with God and my journey as I'm walking with the Lord and He's speaking to me, I can't predict the life that comes along, but I know that if I'm rooted and I'm grounded in Christ and I'm rooted in His Word, that when those situations come, I can respond to them appropriately. And it's the same thing in worship. If you're rooted and grounded in the Lord and you know His voice and you hear His voice, and you're rooted and grounded in love for the congregation, love for Jesus, love for His Word, and you have that, and you've done your homework so that you have a catalog of music that is part of your being. I mean, one of the things that always frustrates me is you can get with any worship band, right, and they'll break out into Led Zeppelin or, AC/DC. Now they can break out in Dave Matthews songs, and they know them by heart. It's like you start playing a note, and all of a sudden everybody's in, and they know exactly how the song goes.
Sure.
But then you get to the songs of heaven, the songs of worship that are, way less complicated than those songs, and they're clueless. Like, I don't even know those songs. I remember one time we were with a drummer, and he was so clueless. I turned to him. I said, "Don't you even go to church? I mean, even if you go to church, you're going to hear these songs,
keep a foundational, a heavenly beat there, you know.
Yeah.
Hey, Holland, we're going to take a quick break. We're talking to Holland Davis in a brand new book here on worship. It's called Let It Rise. We want to come back and play a little clip of that very famous song by now, and catch back up with Holland here with a few more thoughts on corporate worship, and then take our worship life really into the workplace, out of the streets, or wherever you might be this afternoon as well. About 13 after 1 here at KMKT. It's Peter Benson right back with ABQ Connect.
Let the glory of the Lord rise among us. Let the glory of the Lord rise among us.
Of course, we know that song, Let It Rise. That's the Big Daddy Weave version. Holland, how long ago did you write that particular song?
That song was actually written, I think, back in 1994.
Really? Wow.
It was actually, I write the story of it in the book, but just a brief story. It was really kind of a gift from God, literally a spontaneous song that was given right at the moment of, I was leading worship at Calvary Chapel of Point Loma at the time, so.
Wow. So it took that long. Did Big Daddy just kind of pick it up, or how did it happen to get to be a hit here just a couple of years ago?
Well, what it was is we had a girl come into our church one day, and you know, just randomly, and she said hello, and then I got this email from her, and she said she was related to one of the guys in the band. And they had just recorded this song, so I called them up, and they just said, you know, this was a song that they've been doing for years in their youth group, and they just loved the song, and they just wanted to, you know, really, you know, kind of give it a new, fresh look, and because it was a favorite. And they went in the studio, and this is what they came out with, and it's fantastic.
That's great. Now, of course, it's given birth to this book, the Let It Rise book, and it's all about corporate worship, but worship relationships. And you talk a lot about the worship leader and his relationship, number one, with the Lord, but then with the other worshipers, and with the pastor, and that's a very critical area there, isn't it?
It really is, and you know, it's kind of a funny thing because the worship leader and the pastor are the two most visible people in the church, and so often that relationship isn't really all that it could be. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has really kind of gave rise to, within the book, I kind of talk about, you know, what a worship leader needs from a pastor and what a pastor needs from a worship leader. And I've been really fortunate throughout my life to have great pastors. You know, as we mentioned, I was Skip's worship leader here when he was at Ocean Hills, and we had just a fantastic relationship, and just the solidarity, the synergy that was able to happen through that relationship really showed on the platform. And so that's something I really talk about. You know, it's so vital. There's communication, and that both, you know, people not only understand each other, but know how to, you know, relate to each other in a way that really it blesses the entire congregation.
Sure, it's got to go beyond just styles of music and individual songs, but really into the heart of what is communicated.
Right, and one of the things I say is that, you know, great worship leaders aren't born, they're made. And, you know, I'm the fruit of, you know, a pastor that came alongside of me when I was just starting out, and he mentored me for the first 10 years of my ministry and really taught me everything I know, and sent me to conferences and invested in me, and really poured into my life, not just through relationship, but also in education and making sure I was developing as a leader, not just as someone who played guitar. And so you know, that has kind of been a real foundational principle that I really try to pass on to other pastors. And so, you know, the book is really not just for worship leaders. It's really for pastors and worshipers, people that really just want to know about worship.
Well, it's great. And, of course, you love to pour your heart for worship into folks and mentor them, and you do these Worship Life conferences now. Tell me about the two you've got coming up this summer.
Well, it's kind of exciting because over the last 9 years, we've had a conference that we've done. This year, we made the decision, rather than have a one national conference, we were going to focus on regional conferences, mostly because of economic reasons with folks just not being able to travel and go different places.
Sure.
So we thought we would rather go to them. So, of course, the first folks that came up were from Maui, Hawaii. So I thought,
well,
they said, well, would you pray about coming? And I said, well, let me pray about it. Okay, I'll come. And so we're going to be there July 10th through the 12th at the Calvary Chapel out there, and be doing a worship conference for all the Calvary Chapels over there and anyone else that wants to come. And if they go to worshipconference.org, they can get all the information on that.
Okay.
The other conference that we're doing is at Calvary Chapel of South Bay, and it's a one-day conference, and I think it starts with a night of worship on Friday night, and then on Saturday we'll have a full conference there with some great speakers and great worship leaders being a part of that event as well. And both of these events are very cost-effective. I think they're like $25 each to attend. And so we really wanted to partner with events that were regional, that were really just reaching out to the local guys, because that's really where worship happens. It's not this big, huge thing. It really happens on the local level in the hearts of churches that are maybe they don't have a full-time worship leader. Maybe they don't have all the bells and whistles, but they really have a heart for Jesus, and that's what we want to encourage.
That's wonderful. And, we're within kind of the local range of that. L.A. flights are not that expensive, and you say it's at South Bay, the L.A. area, coming up, June 6th, did you say?
Yeah, that's June 6th for that one, yeah.
Okay, very good. And worshipconference.org?
Worshipconference.org. And where all the information on all the events that we're supporting is all on there.
Wonderful. Holland, thank you so much. I know this book is just releasing here this week, right?
Yes, it should be hitting the stores, and I've got mine coming tomorrow to my house.
Okay.
And so I'm super excited, and it really is. Again, I've had different people read it, and the endorsements on it are amazing. Everything from Noel Richards, who's a great leader in the worship movement in the UK, and Sherry Keggy, who's has been started out as a worship leader, as a Christian contemporary artist, but
sure,
all kinds of great people. Chip Ingram, from Walk Through the Bible, gave a great endorsement for the book.
Right. The name that stands out to me is Odin Fong.
Yes,
I hadn't heard his name since the 80s,
Yeah,
so that's great.
Mustard Seed Faith, and that guy is he's one of the pioneers of worship. Really, a lot of the worship we have today are because of those guys. So we're just really, really excited, and we just are just so blessed that to see such a great welcoming to the material in the book.
Well, Holland will hopefully get a couple of copies here by the end of the week, and maybe be able to give those away as well. And thanks for joining us on this Monday afternoon here.
Absolutely.
Holland Davis again from Ocean Hills Worship and 107.1 KNKT. It's about 26 after 1 o'clock. Right back with more. We're talking Jubilee Festival, and that's coming up next at KNKT.